All right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Shika Singh. Shika Singh is the coordinator for the JLW CISMA, Jackson, Lenawee, Washtenaw Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from the University of Western Ontario and her Master's and PhD at Michigan State University from the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. She's been working on Great Lakes environmental issues for over 19 years in the fields of water conservation and invasion biology. She works to assist residents and partners in identifying invasive species, providing management information, and how to prevent their spread to new areas. She also gives talks on strategies to increase diversity, accessibility, and participation related to natural resource outreach and education. Outside of work, Shika also enjoys nature photography, cooking, and playing soccer. Please welcome Shika.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. And I hope everything is I have my video on, but if things get a little bit scary, then I can turn my video on off just for bandwidth. So welcome to this presentation. I'm really excited to speak to you all. I'm not sure I've spoken to folks in Long Island before. So I hope that some of the stuff that we cover today will be of use to you all. A brief roadmap of some of the things that we're going to talk about. I just want to introduce our organization, mention climate change to place context into some of the challenges that we're facing as we manage stiltgrass, and the approach that we have taken to addressing stiltgrass needs in our area. So as I mentioned, we are from Michigan, and if you look at this picture, this area, we are near the bottom of Michigan. And I know usually we put our hand up and we point out to our counties. And, we do a lot of different things. And we are a group of partners and stakeholders who have essentially come together to address invasive species issues. We are grant funded, and we do a variety of outreach, survey and management, consulting, and site visits. And primarily, I'm the one that does all this, but I am housed at a conservation district. So I'm not familiar with Long Island if you guys have conservation districts, but I also, do work as a biologist there. Normally, I would ask people, what comes to mind when people ask you to describe Michigan. And I'm still going to go with that script, but on a parallel track, when I ask this question, think about in your own mind, like if someone were to describe Long Island, what would it look like? And actually, this might be a good moment for people to unmute briefly and just shout out what screams Long Island to you. If anyone, I don't know, maybe Cassidy, if you want to take a stab since you're hosting me.
Yeah, I'll give you two, both biodiverse and highly populated.
All right, sounds good.
I was going to say
And
Sandy
traffic.
soil.
pardon
Sandy
me?
soil.
Oh, sandy soil. Excellent. And so when I describe Michigan, typically, we get a lot of people talking about natural resources, parks, the a gem. If you have not been to the Great Lakes region, Sleeping Bear Dunes is gorgeous. So please come out and visit that. And again, a lot of camping, natural resources, hiking, and we have a lot of natural areas. And so our state boasts about 35,000 inland lakes. We also share a international wildlife refuge with Canada, which is my home country. So go Canada. And our state also has a lot of forests. So over 20 plus million acres of forest, and 4 out of 5 Great Lakes love us. So we're pretty proud of that. I don't know about Lake Ontario, but the rest of us love us at least. We also have a thriving agricultural industry, wheat to corn, fruits. And so this is also part of our Pure Michigan campaign. I don't know if any of you have seen that before. So in addition to having all these, cool features like inland lakes, we have common species. So those of you in Long Island, reflect upon what day-to-day cool species that you see on the regular, whether it's like, salamanders or birds, squirrels. But we also have a variety of unique species. And so things like the Mitchell satyr, which is a highly, endangered butterfly, only like about like 9 like little pockets in the the region of the Great Lakes. We have the Kirtland warbler, we have the Massasauga rattlesnake. And so I actually have two pictures here because in my region that I work in, we actually have the melanistic version of the rattlesnake as well. So minus the nail polish on the tail, we have this is what most people see, but we do have this really beautiful dark colored snake, and you can kind of see the saddle patches underneath, and it even has like a little oil glisten sheen to it. Really beautiful, but very, very unique. We also have a lot of unique natural areas, and I'm sure Long Island has that as well. So we have like Oak Barrens, we have, natural or recreational areas with like channels of lakes. Watkins Lake State Park is a jointly managed county and state preserve. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because that's going to be the set of our Stiltgrass story. And then that Watkins Lake is also a designated waterfowl refuge. So, and that's, there's a lot of cool things in there. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So let's talk about climate change a little bit. Like we hear about it, and I feel like the conservation community and society in general has come a long way in, understanding what climate change is and some of the impacts it has on us and our natural areas. So things like, changes in climate, there are factors such as, extreme weather, increased global temperature, and then, effects of, like extreme heat related illnesses. That's an example of health impacts. And then there's also like intervention and strategy. So things like, when you think about early warning and preparedness, prevention, community engagement, and so on. And so some of the circled areas, the topics are what our management teams are having to deal with in Michigan. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This is the temperature change in Michigan since 1895. We can kind of see that there is a progressive heating of the planet. That's the bottom, like the smaller one, but Michigan's the front center. And what does this mean? So, climate change, it has impacts and has a projected impact on a variety of species. I know I'm talking about grass for today, but for all you bird lovers, I decided to throw up a link of bobolinks. Here is a map of what is projected for their habitat. And so if you right now, at current, they're going to be as they are, but plus 1.5 degrees or like even 3 degrees. This is what this picture shows. We do stand for this species to lose at least 88% of their land. You can kind of see that they're shifting upwards, but they are gaining some, but not at the same rate that they're losing. And then just to kind of continue with that bird idea, reducing, warming makes sense. And so here's a couple of maps. A lot of our eastern forest birds are going to, stand to lose some of that habitat. And, scientists generally agree that we should take immediate action to keep the warming, where it is, to kind of mitigate it or slow it down. Otherwise, if we do nothing, you can kind of see the number of potential birds being impacted. I also tried to do Suffolk County for the New Yorkers, and again, some trends as well. Like, the worse it gets, the eastern birds, kind of suffer, as well as some of the other ones. You can see some changes. I also want to highlight a really cool paper and really amazing researchers, Jenica Allen and Bethany Bradley. They looked at invasive species plant range projection, and you can kind of see that there are, certain regions of the country, mainly the Northeast, that are, projected to be in the area where there's going to be a lot of gain for invasive species invasion, hot spots, so to speak. And, you could get up to hundred new invasive species. And so, we need to be cognizant and thinking about these things. And so this is, I have the citation here if you want to take a look at that paper. But it, in our region, it is concerning. So climate change does seem to have an impact. or projected impact. And so now let's get back to the species of the hour, which is Japanese stiltgrass. I want to at least introduce you to this species because I feel like some of you may not be familiar with. Some of you may be old pros in different areas, have seen it when you're traveling. I'm not sure how bad Japanese stiltgrass is. I don't really see any green specks in your area, but it is moving towards us. And this is a shade, full sun tolerant plant, which are, conflicting, but that basically means that this plant can pretty much, grow anywhere. It won't grow in like really swampy, wet areas, really moist, really, wet, damp areas. But for the most part, shade, partially shade, full sun, they love it. They're there. They typically have a spring germination and then a fall dieback. And this species was also first reported in about 1919, and it was used as packing material for imported porcelain from China. And so, as you can imagine, people probably got their materials and then, probably threw the packing material out in their back. And, some of it could have contained seeds, and here we are now. It is very easily spread. And if you have a lot of bare, sparse patches of grass, this species will take over. And you can kind of see some pictures over here. We have some bare areas that are typically supposed to be bare, and you can kind of see some silt grass creeping in. Japanese siltgrass has lance-shaped leaves, and a lot of grass looks like grass in the beginning. And so, I have the Lucerne species. It's more of a longer tapered grass, whereas this is lance shaped, so it's a little bit thicker, broader in the middle. These leaves are about 1 to 3 inches long and are pale in color. So the picture on the right over here is like more a sun, a little bit looks brighter, and then this is more on a shadier, cloudy day. It does have a mid-rib, which is slightly off center, which is nicely shown in this picture over here. It's not exactly in the center. And same in this one, it's not exactly in the center. And it has a reflective silvery line along that vein, that midrib. But if you notice and look at some of the pictures here, not all of the leaves have it. And, sometimes if you look at it, it's not like it's a painted line that you can actually see. It's like more of a reflective, and sometimes like some of the younger leaves may not have it. And the leaves also grow alternately. So, one, it kind of staggers, so to speak. And I have some more pictures, shortly. So let's look at some of the reproductive aspects of this plant. It does produce 1 to 3 flower spikes, which are about 1 to 3 inches. You can see 2 here, and then 1 is just starting to come up over there. And it occurs on the terminal or in the leaf axis, so near the top. And the thing about it, I might mention this later on, it's just, I put months and times here, but it really is a little bit flexible depending on what area you're working in. We have seen these flower spikes show up in like September through October. The fruit itself is about 3 millimeters, like they're, long grain-like, yellowish red. And this plant reproduces mainly by seed. So each plant could have 100 to 1,000 seeds. And you can quickly see how it can, if you only have 1 or 2 in the beginning, it can very quickly become a problem. Literature generally says that, these seeds are potentially viable for 5 years. And I think with a lot of these seed species, there is a severe mortality in soil within after 2 years, or sorry, within the first 2 years. And so the seed bank is still a very big concern. But I think it's also cognizant to look at that there is some seed mortality, and if you have 100, or 1,000 seeds, not all of them will reproduce. But these are easily spread, and then part of that could be impacted by, how much rain are you getting? Is there a disturbance? Is there, flooding of the area? So things like that could impact, the mortality of the seeds. And there is like some research out there I want to highlight. Redwood et al. They did a paper on 2018 about seed longevity, and they looked at garlic mustard as well as Japanese stiltgrass. Just a really clear picture of this. This is like the last leaf, and then you can kind of see these 3 spikes coming up. So this does have multiple stems. And so what will happen is that at the beginning, you'll have, a thin, a green stem that pops up. And that stem, has a decent amount of water for a stem in the spring and summer. And then it will turn brown, over the year. And in the winter, it turns into like a yellow tan, winter thatch. It does branch near the base, and so then you'll see other shoots pop up. The leaves are smooth, and they do have some hair at the leaf sheath. You can kind of see, this is the best I could do, but here are some hairs that you can kind of look at for ID. And in the fall, it does have a purplish brown top. This can actually reach pretty tall, about 2 to 4 feet. I know I'm 5'3" and I've had it reach, like armpit height. So it can get quite tall. And then those stems will sprawl. So they do have like a stolon type structure. And then, you'll have rootlets that form at different nodes along that. And then it'll, send up different stems. And I have a better picture that kind of highlights this. And this structure, this formation, it kind of gives it its name, like it has like stilt-like growth, like props, so to speak. So it gets this, common name stiltgrass like that. The good news is that these roots are relatively shallow, so they are very easily pulled. So that's good news. You can yank them, and it's even better on a day where the rain has occurred and the ground is a little bit moist. You can easily yank those guys up. Some more pictures of stiltgrass hair. And I just wanted to show you, this is a picture of like blue stem, big blue stem, a native grass. You can kind of see how the hair is a little bit different, a little bit more pronounced going up the stem. Whereas in the stilt grass here, you pretty much just see around that little armpit. I call it an armpit area, but yeah, so over there. And then this is, like that stilt-like structure I was talking about. If you look over here, you can see how it kind of moves across. And keep in mind, all these things are like shooting upward. So it's, perpendicular to the ground. And you can see these like runners and then these little roots that are forming. You can see a little bit better on this grayish garbage bag. Little nodes and some roots coming down here. This was, I think, the main one, like the first one that came up. And then it starts growing. So we have seen this species in a variety of areas. We've seen it in wooded areas, private residences, and we think that, shared landscapers in these areas could be spreading it, especially in the Washtenaw region. We also have seen it along recreational areas, ATV, 2 tracks, bike paths. We also think that deer could be a potential in, spreading it as well. Because as you can see in other pictures, like those seeds are very small. It's very easy for it to get stuck in the crevices of hooves, in feathers and birds and so on. We also noticed that in a state park area, we had a newly built mountain bike trail. It's only been around for a few years. And the last couple of years, we have also noticed that stiltgrass is popping up, just off the bike path. So this is also something to consider. So let's set the stage of our journey here. One of the sites I work on this in 2 sites. One is a private property in Lenawee County, but some of the main research and like the work that's being done in this area takes place at Watkins Lake State Park and County Preserve. And I would like to take a few moments to mention a very good collaborator of mine, Allison Kruger. She is at the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission, and a really wonderful person, has really great staff. And so the stuff that we do, we are working with various local agencies. And so Watkins Lake State Park and County Preserve was, the land was purchased in 2016, and it was part of the underground railway system here. We had some farmers in the area, the Watkins family, and there was like a runaway slave, I think, that had made its way north, and the family, kind of provided, like a deterrence for the people who are looking for that individual, and kind of like move them away or like dissuaded them, and they didn't let them, search the land and the area. And this area was, a former farmland, and so it has been, restored. A lot of the land has been restored, but there are some areas in the other part that wasn't purchased, which is still functioning as a farm, as far as I know. And as I had mentioned before, it is also a waterfowl refuge. And you can see in this picture, this is just the northern part of a really, really nice lake that is split by a road. And it kind of goes, like, I think at least twice as big on the other side, and twice, maybe at least double what you're seeing in this photo. So it's a quite large lake. And spots where we're seeing stiltgrass, you can kind of see in these yellow oval and circle areas. And here is a pathway, a common pathway. Everybody, a lot of people use it, birders, bikers, and so on. So this pathway that I'm pointing to here is this. It's actually in this area over here. So there is a lot of activity. And before this became, a park, it used to be privately owned. And, people used to like have their ATVs, and there are some 2 tracks. I mean, they used to like do some logging, sell some trees. And so that's the setting. And this picture is pretty much smack dab somewhere over here. So heavily forested. Beautiful area. Here's some more parts of the lake. This part is being managed, so it's, being partially restored. Here's like a part of the prairie area, fens and marshes. So it's beautiful. A lot of really cool wildlife here. So this infestation was first confirmed in 2020 of October, and we began summer treatment like the following year. And so we were able to get some funding, and we are working on it. Unfortunately, some of the funding was cut this year. But hopefully we're still gonna try, and maybe some of our partners can get some match. But it started in 2021, and then shortly after, I think 2021 and 2022, we had a bunch of intense storms, at least 2 years of intense storms, took out a bunch of trees and opened up some canopy. And our results that we were getting were really good. We saw a lot of species getting, invasive species decrease. This is like a nice patch after it was treated with herbicide. But, when that canopy opened up, it kind of did set us back a little bit. And this is one of the 2 track. This is like one tire mark, but you can kind of see this is like area where we started finding the initial events. And excuse me, you can kind of see some of the patchy canopy. And so just to kind of show you a private property view of where we did find siltgrass, a lot of natural areas. We did some treatment, but this site we were doing a lot of hand pulling and mowing to keep it in check. Again, storms blocked off a mowing access, so unfortunately that siltgrass was allowed to grow for a couple years. But this is anecdotal, but we think that established, native vegetation is keeping it at bay. It's really like the open areas that allow it to grow and spread. But remember, this is anecdotal. So in areas that we have seen, a very robust native thatch, it has not seemed to have infiltrated that area. Unfortunately, we talked about siltgrass in this area, but By the time people recognize that, hey, something is weird, it gets late in the game. And so in this graphic, which I'm sure everyone has seen several times, this has area infested on the x-axis, and we have time. Sorry, I apologize. Area infested on the y-axis, time on the x-axis, and control cost on the second y-axis. And as you can imagine, when something is first introduced, there's not really a lot of it infesting the area. So therefore, it doesn't really take that much time and, money to get rid of. By the time you're at this area, it's probably been here for a while. It's really dense, really hard to navigate, and it takes a lot of time and money. And I'm sure there's probably other things that have now come in as well. So you're managing a couple different things. So this part is where you're kind of like, I have a little bit of money. What can I do? What makes sense? What do I want to prioritize and protect? Unfortunately, public awareness usually begins in this area. And this is at the point where, eradication is probably unlikely. You're going to need really intense effort. We have seen this happen, and we have had success in other species. But, for the most part, my experience, by the time we're in this area, we're looking like it's going to get out of control. And so ideally, we want people to, ID and identify an invasion at this level, so where we can actually do something about it. So having this in context, like what did we do when we first realized that we had an invasive species problem? One, we did spend time surveying and managing the site immediately. And we also developed a strategic management plan for this species. And that involved, a lot of research, describing impacts, location, what was our prioritization, method, management tools, what was successful, what wasn't, and, kind of documenting what we did, what we're doing, and coming out with an outreach part as well to kind of address the challenges that I mentioned in the previous slide. So then, we also utilize a partnership, a fellowship approach, because one organization cannot address, this issue alone. This is not like, a nutria, maybe a nutria has just arrived and, there's only one or two of them. And, now is the time maybe someone could do some trapping. This is grass, you know, this is like something where wind and water can very quickly make it out of, spread it to different areas, wildlife, and even, and even the nutrients, like if there's one or two, if people don't do anything about it, people are not aware, it can become a very big problem as I saw actually in Oregon recently, but I digress. So we've taken a partnership approach because we recognize that the more people working on this, understanding this, is important. And so we have worked with various partners to do, a variety of outreach and trainings on the species. And that also includes including it with other invasive species issues, doing a lot of survey and management. So some of the things that we do on a regular basis, we do 3 trainings a year, and I cover 3 counties. I cover Jackson, Lenawee, and Washtenaw counties. And so we do a training that is free, located in each of the counties, and it's really geared towards, a lot of our agency folks, park staff, but it is open to anyone. We have a lot of residents who are just interested in coming. This is also MDARD, is the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And so, they give us pesticide training credits, which is also an incentive to get people to come out. And, we work with, Washtenaw County roads, Jackson County parks, the conservation districts, Tecumseh City Parks. And a lot of these places like host these meetings for free for us because they're dedicated partners. And so you can kind of see some pictures of some of those trainings. And then we work with our partners to do trainings in the field. And, that's training, other local agency, nonprofits, DNR folks. We have people try to come in, from other areas to kind of see what it looks like. Obviously, the work and the play decontamination must occur as well. So we make sure that we're responsible. And then we also do some targeted outreach. And we have done a mailed letter with ID information to landscapers and nurseries in the area. And we attached a flyer for a training session specifically for that demographic. We have also done mailed postcards to area residents. So we have done that with the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission. And the two of us have jointly led field training. And I know Washtenaw County Parks and Rec have also led some more community Washtenaw based field training opportunities. So they've done some good work there. We have also created some ID postcards, which we have mailed and distributed to our partners. We have at tabling events. Michigan Department of Natural Resources has also asked for some of our materials. We have given them to Canadian, the Ojibwe Provincial Park, so they have some of our educational materials out at there. So we really are trying to build a network, and this is a really good, I would say, mechanism or a method that you could apply to a variety of other invasive species. So we're talking about siltgrass today, but you all could do this about newly arriving invasive species in your area. And we'll talk about some of the challenges of doing some of this stuff. And then as far as management options, we have done a couple different things. We've done chemical and physical management. We've done, our partners have done pre-emergent, and I think they use pendulum. Sorry, they did use pendulum. We've used glyphosate for post-emergent. Half percent has worked well for us. And then we also do strategic hand pulling, mowing. If we're not allowed to do, any like chemical application. And I know some of our partners have done some spot treatment using flame. So some of the management timelines, and this will probably shift or could be different for you all in New York. But we've seen some, we don't want to do a lot of like treatment mucking around when seeds are present, because there's a risk that if we're going into these areas doing treatment and seeds are present, it's harder to decontaminate. So we really want to target treatment before the seeds arrive. Same with the pulling and the cutting. We don't want these seeds to stick to us and us to accidentally transport it elsewhere. So we talked a lot about, what climate change does. We talked about stiltgrass and some of the challenges, and we've talked about, what it is and, some of the issues it has. And now I kind of want to ask the question, is your community prepared? Are your policymakers and decision makers thinking about climate change and invasive species? And so, I bring this up because I think we have come a long way in this topic. It's is climate change a priority for decision makers? It is in some areas. And there has been a ton of research, which I'm not presenting today, but it has, regionality, it could impact with age, political leanings, but ultimately climate change is something that is here, and it can impact us from an agricultural standpoint, recreation standpoint. Michigan, we derive a lot of money from folks who come in and recreate in our natural areas, whether it's fishing, hiking, camping, you name it. There's a lot of money here. And if climate change is not an issue, folks may not prioritize resources to address these issues. And we have seen, like, just a capacity issue, because invasive species just doesn't respect geographic boundaries, as you can imagine. They're like, I'm going to go here. This is comfortable. This is where I'm going to go. And this means that, budgets, are not in tune with the needs. And this time, we're going to have to talk about not relying on traditional management timelines. We're going to have to maybe treat earlier or later, and this may not align with your fiscal year. We have another species coming up, lesser celandine. It, arrives very quickly early, and sometimes you just don't have the grants in place and signed to address them, properly. And so this means that, grant providers may need to adapt their expectations, and all of us, whether it's policymakers, decision makers, land managers, will have to start to account for uncertainty. So, what are some of the general challenges that I think local partners and agencies need to consider? You have warmer field days, maybe you have, more warmer days. And this means that there's, less field days for you to actually get out there, because we don't want a lot of our volunteers who may be older, retired folks. But then we also have people who have health issues. And it's just sometimes, even if you're healthy and if it's really, really hot, you can't, it's not safe to be out there, especially when there's no protection, no shade. And this means less field days on top of things like lightning, bad weather, and scheduling conflicts. We have other things that we're dealing with. And other invasive species could thrive on these warmer days. So that's just making it worse. Another thing to address is that, when you have low income communities of color, they may have less money or a capacity to adapt to some of these changing conditions. And so it really is important for us to look and help some of these different communities, because money and capacity is going to be a challenge. And sometimes, you hear about prescribed burns. I mean, it's people do use it for brush management, invasive species. But if we are getting, weird days, we are getting warmer days, maybe drier days, there could be some increased unpredictability in doing that. And are we prepared? Do we have properly trained people who are able to address and make those prescribed burn decisions? And then we have things like, weather intensity, floods, drier days mean, more fire prone days, disease. And when you have people, so for example, stiltgrass, we're out there in the forest. We're out there, in knee-high brush conditions, even in the prairies and stuff like that. And we are seeing, more ticks these days. We are also seeing, more barberry, and some of these woody, well, especially barberry has been known to have an increased relationship with ticks. And, some of these ticks could have nasty diseases. So we also are seeing that as well. So what are our challenges, like the JLW CISMA challenges? I kind of mentioned some of those newly open canopies that, some of the areas that saw increased growth. Physical barriers like down trees. And sometimes, we have money to like do the actual treatment, but we don't have money to call in, or to do, maintenance or tree removal or, access clearing. With warmer days, I mentioned before, we do struggle with volunteer demographics, trying to get people to want to come out on a hot, muggy day to do, pull weeds when they probably have weeds at home that they need to pull. And this can also mean like shorter work days. So we have less effort that we're able to put towards management. Last year, we also had a lot of, poor air quality. So that was kind of related to some of the wildfires from out west. But, if these prescribed burns and other things are going to happen and they are going to get out of control, then, we may have more air quality issues and, due to pollution. So air quality could be an issue. And this meant that we had to cancel some field days, and it's hard to reschedule. I mean, you all know this, when you're trying to plan something and it involves multiple people, sometimes it's just like a luck that you're able to get everybody together, but that may not happen if you have to reschedule. The constant, fight with budgets and timelines, breakout population, trying to address those, trying to like make sure that we get funding. So we've been funded for a couple years to do this work, saltgrass work, but this year we were unable to secure funding for this project. So um, we do have some money, like our partners do, but it's going to be half as much. So what does that mean for our projected success? Are we going to lose a year? We don't know. Lose some of the success, the momentum. And this also be emotional, as with many invasive species. Like it's a daunting activity. You don't have a lot of money. people don't always value what you're doing. They don't actually see the value in what you're doing. Um, and it's also managing your own expectations and rethinking what success looks like. You're doing the best with what you can. And then also, it is hard to find. Like I have a really good ability to find these invasive species. And can anyone find? There's a couple in this picture. There's one over here. There's one over here. But I have an eye for it, so I can go through and I can pick it out like one plant or one stem in a bunch of regular grass. But if you're new to working with stiltgrass, it could be very hard to find. And stiltgrass is not our only concern. I talked about lesser celandine. That's coming in. Spotted lanternfly is an issue. I know that a lot of you are dealing with spotted lanternfly in New Jersey. And what we do now matters. Climate change does affect a lot of organisms and plants on Earth, and the amount of effort and what we do today will impact our current and future generations. And so we need to make really good and smart choices. And part of that means accounting for uncertainty and planning for uncertainty. And therefore, like if you anticipate some of these needs, and you're not going to anticipate everything, I recognize that. And, small organizations have less capacity, but we just don't want to be caught off guard. So try to, plan, do the best you can so that we don't end up with big infestations. So if anyone has any questions, I think, how are we doing on time? I think we have some.
We have lots of time. It's happy
Yeah.
to give you that time for questions.
Yeah.
Any questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute. That was
I
great, Shika. Thank you so
I
much.
will thank you so much for an awesome presentation. I I love the last slide. I will have questions. I'm going to email you if you could put your email in the chat.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Have a lot of you like dealt with stiltgrass here before? Like even like any one-off populations?
Yeah, it's definitely around. Stiltgrass is definitely here. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Definitely likes the wet areas. And I found it interesting you mentioned managing a variety of different methods, hand pulling, mowing, chemical, and you said some partners do like flame treatments of it too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the thing is like I'm not sure like if the flame treatment, I mean it's helpful, but the one thing about, burns, it doesn't quite get all, it's not going to hit the seed bank. So you're still going to have to do maintenance, and the fire, depending on the, the movement and what's going on, animals moving and trails and stuff, you get, things getting buried over time. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's an interesting thing. We've seen some success with it, but I know we've seen a lot of really good glyphosate positive reactions with this.
Nice. Yeah. I think this is also a perfect presentation to follow the Play Clean Go presentation, because it definitely is one that's, like you said, spreads over equipment, boots. I've seen it pop up on in New Jersey from landscapers bringing it in. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's unfortunate that it spreads so easily, but it's very good at getting around, I guess.
And one of the issues that I didn't really bring up is like, we have a lot of landscaping companies. There are going to be like some that are the established ones. Like they've been around for like 20, 30 years. They're stable, but then you have a lot of folks that are just, starting out their business. And when we did that mailing, we had to rely on groups that were like, registered, they had their license,
Mm.
from the state. And so obviously we're going to miss some of these, like small, I haven't, my neighbor's, husband has a side gig, or my daughter is trying to earn some summer money, and so she's doing this. And so there's a lot of that in these neighborhoods going on. And then some of these businesses are only around for like 1 or 2 years, and then they move on. So um it's hard to maintain continuity with the education. It's hit and miss, and hopefully we are trying to get, some people. I will say in one of those private properties that we are managing, it is mowed by, a friend of a friend. So you know, I just happened to come across them one day when they're there, but I said what I mentioned, hey, could you be careful, decontaminate, but what are the chances they're going to actually listen to me and actually do it, right? Because time is money. People always have other things to do. So those are some of the things.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. It's something we think about too. And yeah, the outreach and an understanding of their industry is definitely a big component too.
And I think when we are doing outreach and education, I think it's important to, you know, respect these industries as well, because we're all trying to exist in this space, and we do want these industries to succeed. We want to support, you know, these small businesses as well. And, you know, it's not helpful to be like, you know, come in with like a wagging finger, like you're doing something wrong. And so we really do want to work with, and we've seen good responses. We've given presentations. I've given presentations to the nursery and landscape industry and stuff. So we're really about trying to create a positive messaging and positive action.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do we.
Yeah. So what are some of your main issues? I know I'm the presenter, but I'm really curious. Like, what are your top 3 invasives that are your concern?
Top 3. Other guy, you guys can jump in here too. The top 3 is hard to narrow down. I'd say one that is similar to stiltgrass, that's an emerging invasive species here, is called Arthraxon, or small carpet grass. It
Mm.
looks very similar, and it also prefers to grow in wet areas. So that's one we try to educate people about. Can also be spread in similar ways. Actually, it seems like it goes to seed at the same time as stiltgrass from what you shared on your slide. So that's one that comes to mind for me.
And I also just want to mention that, you know, when I say wet areas, I mean, typically we see it more in the forest. Like, it's not like, you know, it's not wet areas. It's just regular, you know, like, we have seen it in moist areas. So it's not, I just want to clarify that it's not in like these really high density wet areas. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, Cass, do you have any others that come to mind?
You took mine. Arthraxon's like our poster child for EDRR.
And I think so the reason why I also found it valuable to come and talk to you all is because I mentioned that invasive species, you know, they don't respect geographical boundaries. And I think that a lot of things coming from the east, you know, it's coming from your end, or, you know, there are some things that we're having that's driving and going eastward. And so I think it's really important to maintain these networks to support and help each other learn as things, arrive.
Yeah. Any
Sorry,
other
hold on.
questions? Or if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, you're welcome to do that too.
I'd like to unmute and quickly ask, thanks, Dr. Singh, for your presentation. Definitely very interested in the connection between invasive species and climate change, because I feel like that connection isn't necessarily talked about as much as it should, for sure. And if you could expand more on, I guess, is it like a cause and effect where um, is the connection between invasive species and climate change more so climate change is resulting in the spread of more invasive species, or is there a further connection between climate change and invasive species management?
Yeah, and this is, I appreciate the question, and I know it's a very complex, and part of our thing is like, we don't, like, for me, I don't have empirical data saying, you know, like, hey, climate, you know, this is climate change happening, and we have seen like X, percent increase in stiltgrass and doing that. What we are noticing on the field, on the ground, is more intense, weather patterns. So it's not like we're, like even like the windy conditions, we've seen a lot more windy, tree felling, conditions. And so maybe not the number of events is increasing, but maybe the intensity, like the shift towards it being more intense, we have seen, especially in some of the areas that we're working in. And, as far as like range, climate change, definitely, because I've been working on this for like, 5 years. So it's very difficult for me to say like within this 5 years, this is climate change. You almost need to have a longer track record. And so some of the things that I'm mentioning with climate change, um, you would need to look at it from a longer time period. And so I think it would be, if you want to look at cause and effects, I think that might be something that you're going to look maybe to some of our southern managers, like, maybe in Tennessee and like, what's it called? Like some of the Carolinas and stuff, to see what, if there's like a more longer like shift in what they're seeing result wise. So I hope I answered your question. I don't think I did a very good job at answering your question, but I can only, like, on a short scale that we've been working on this one species. Those are some of the things that we are seeing, and like when things are starting to emerge. So we've seen some species emerge earlier than some of the traditional timelines have said, and so. And part of that is like this weird wonky change, like we're seeing more uncertainty, I think, is like, when does spring actually start? Like before, I feel like we had a little bit better, we need to send our crews out at this time period. And now we do a little pre-scouting before we send the big crew out. Sorry, Lorena, does that help, or does that offer any insight?
Yeah, I think it does for sure. It's great you mentioned the Carolinas. I'm based in Charlotte, so I definitely would try to explore a bit more about the connection to climate change and invasive species here. I know with risk, I guess it looks like you're having a symposium March 11th,
Yes.
I think. So yeah, I definitely want to try
Yes.
to attend that. That sounds great. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
that will be that's a good plug. It's on the 11th and the 12th.
Awesome.
And actually, maybe what I could do is I stopped sharing. I might, if you let me stay on this a little bit, I could maybe dig up that registration link. And I'll put it in the chat.
For sure.
I
be
think that,
good.
yeah. And unfortunately, there's another thing that's going on. I'll just give the Northeast Risk Network page, and then the information is there. But there's also the Spotted Lanternfly Summit, which is also occurring. So there's a couple of things maybe you can divide and conquer. But that's the Northeast Risk page. And then right on that link, there is, under upcoming events, there's a place for you to register. And there's also like an agenda as well. So thank you for bringing that up. I forgot.
Great. Thank you. I plan on attending the risk thing next week, so
Yeah.
I'll be looking forward to hearing more.
So yeah, please reach out if you have any other questions. So thank you again for letting me talk to you and for enduring my Lord of the Rings clip art.
Well, it was so much fun. Thank you so much, Shika.
Yeah. Bye.